Hello and welcome to the Dailies. International outlets closely followed Trump's stalled push for a Ukraine peace deal, noting little movement in talks. And in the US, attention sharpened on the expanding Hexeth boat strike scandal as new details deepened scrutiny. And in the Middle East, media highlighted the rare direct talks between Israel and Lebanon, seen as a cautious diplomatic opening. International outlets continued to follow the Witkoff-Putin meeting, which yielded no real movement, with Moscow holding firm on key territorial demands. Coverage stressed that Russia accepted minor points but rejected meaningful compromise. Overall, the tone broadcast the talks as another sign that diplomacy remains stalled. The New York Times examines the collapse of President Trump's self-imposed Thanksgiving deadline for a Russia-Ukraine peace deal, highlighting how his envoys left Moscow empty-handed after a 5-hour meeting with Vladimir Putin. The piece underscores Putin's unwavering territorial demands and Trump's narrowing options: pressure Kiev into deeper concessions, walk away, or restore U.S. military aid he previously halted. It portrays a peace push drifting far from Trump's promises. Also, as proposals keep shifting, diplomacy is stalling and skepticism is rising in Washington and in Europe. Newsweek details the breakdown of high-stakes diplomacy at the Kremlin, where U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff and also Jared Kushner failed to persuade Russian President Vladimir Putin to accept a compromise peace deal for Ukraine. The piece also notes that Russian officials declared that no agreement was reached, also underscoring persistent gaps over territorial and security demands. The report frames the failed talks as a blow to U.S. peace push ambitions and a signal that Moscow remains unyielding. Politico explores how Belgium Prime Minister is blocking a major EU plan to use frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine, arguing Belgium would be exposed to massive legal and also financial liability. The piece explains that the Prime Minister demands legally binding guarantees and shared liability before consenting, framing the proposal as a dangerous overreach and a threat to Belgium's financial stability. The report underscores widening fractures within the EU over how best to support Kiev. Mamdouh Al-Mheni argues in Sharq al-Awsat that the war in Ukraine isn't just a clash between nations, but a global battle over competing international systems, a liberal, rules-based order backed by the West versus a disruptive alternative pushed by Russia and its allies. In this context, the enduring cohesion of the Gulf Cooperation Council region, its local stability, economic openness, and global partnerships is cast as a critical pillar of global order. The author warns that the adversaries aim to dismantle the Gulf system to undermine Western-friendly structure, making Gulf unity vital not only for regional stability, but for preserving a stable world system in an unstable, multipolar era. U.S. media continue to focus on the intensifying scrutiny of the Hexeth boat strike scandal, focusing on fresh details about protocol breaches and the contested legality of the second strike. Coverage noted rising bipartisan pressure for transparency and evidence. But overall, outlets framed the controversy as escalating rather than settling. The Washington Post examines the intensifying congressional backlash against Hexeth after reports that a September strike on a suspected drug smuggling boat may represent a grave legal overreach. The piece highlights a classified briefing that left lawmakers alarmed by the lack of legal counsel and unclear mission strategy. Even reliable Republicans are now publicly questioning Hegseth's leadership, signaling growing bipartisan pressure as oversight committees pursue videos, footage, documentation, and also accountability. This comes as a Pentagon watchdog found that Hegseth violated security rules by sharing sensitive strike details over his personal phone and the unsecured Signal app. In an exclusive, the Wall Street Journal reveals that a senior U.S. admiral will tell lawmakers that 2 survivors of a September strike on a suspected drug smuggling boat were still aboard a damaged vessel and actively attempting to continue the mission, and by that, justifying a second fatal attack. The piece says that the claim is intended to counter accusations that killing surviving crew members amounted to a war crime. And the report notes that the disclosure has sparked outrage and intense legal scrutiny as Congress presses for full accountability and proof. In the UK, The Telegraph presented newly released, never-before-seen images and video of the island of horrors where Epstein allegedly trafficked minors, offering a chilling behind-the-scenes look at his former Caribbean compound. Now, the visuals, as you can see in the piece, they highlight a dentist chair, also draped with masks, bedrooms as well, and a chalkboard scrolled with ominous words and forbidding no trespassing signs, all reinforcing long-standing allegations of abuse and secrecy. The piece concludes that the release, driven by Congress, intensifies pressure for full disclosure in the ongoing Epstein investigation. The Times revealed in an exclusive that a recent investigation claims that Andrew lobbied Middle East royals, including Bahrain's Crown Prince and an Omani government advisor, to advance business ventures tied to his defunct startup network, Pitch, at Palace. The piece highlights how Andrew used royal contacts to explore establishing a bank in Bahrain and even a bid to buy a major newspaper. Though the deal ultimately collapsed, according to the report, the messages expose how Andrew attempted to leverage his former status to revive financial opportunities abroad. Moving on to France, as Le Monde examines how former Prime Minister Edouard Philippe is positioning himself as a leading contender to succeed Emmanuel Macron in 2027. The report explains that he has already declared his candidacy and called for early elections, highlighting how it is viewed by many as a bold rupture and reveals deep fractures within France's centrist right coalition. The piece also concludes that though this campaign, or his campaign, emphasizes seriousness, fiscal discipline and also reform, critics warn his technocratic image may struggle to resonate in a political climate increasingly driven by populist emotion. To the Middle East, as the Jerusalem Post reports that Israel and Lebanon have held their first high-level diplomatic talks in decades, a development backed by U.S. efforts to revive regional engagement. The report explains that Israeli and Lebanese representatives spoke directly, and another meeting is already being planned. The piece frames the talks as a tentative but potentially historic thaw, suggesting both countries may be inching toward a diplomatic framework, even as tensions persist over broader security and political dynamics in the region. And we'll end with the Times of Israel, which reveals in an exclusive how the U.S. decided against imposing planned sanctions on Palestinian Authority officials. That would include even President Mahmoud Abbas. They decided that after Abbas dismissed the finance minister responsible for authorizing controversial payments to Palestinian security prisoners. The piece also quotes observers who told the Times of Israel that Washington saw the dismissal as a signal of serious reform. The decision avoided cutting off vital foreign aid to the Palestinian Authority, a move that could have destabilized ongoing diplomatic negotiations. That's it for today. Thanks for watching the Dailies, only on Al Arabiya English.